Hi Saurabh, hi Swapna. So excited to have you over this call today, and really, I was looking forward to this discussion. And so we thought we'd just get together and share our thoughts on all this digitization and data transformation that is gaining all the attention of all the C-level customers that we see. So maybe I'll just introduce myself, and then I'll let you all introduce yourselves, and then we'll go ahead with a few questions. So I've been part of Tech Mahindra for 12 plus years. I'm Monica Srivastava. I've been into data management space technically, functionally, vertically from all aspects for all these 12 years. And currently I'm heading data consulting for Tech Mahindra across the geographies and across the verticals. And Saurabh Jha is my boss. So Saurabh, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Monica, for the welcome. I globally head data and analytics for Tech Mahindra, and that would obviously span across all the geographies and all the verticals. Thank you, Swapna.
Thanks, Saurabh and Monica, first of all, for this opportunity. Very exciting to be partnering with you on this very important topic. My role in Microsoft is to be the solutions specialist for data and AI, what we call in Microsoft databases, analytics, and AI. There's no analytics without data, so it all comes together. And when you have data, you want to use it for AI. So I lead the business for Microsoft in India for this particular technology. And I span the coverage across all the verticals, including public sector. Thank you.
Sure. So thank you for your time in advance, Swapna and Saurabh. So let's begin, and I would want to begin with you, Saurabh. So as data and analytics global head of Tech Mahindra, do you see the digital and the data transformation now as the #1 boardroom agenda? And do you also see the chief data officer getting aligned to the IT CIO, means remain aligned to the CIO, or do you see that the chief data officer is getting aligned to the business organization, the CXO or the CEO rather, and the CEO going forward?
Okay, so here is my take on this. So when you say CDO, I know you mentioned it as Chief Data Officer. In my mind, CDO actually is more of a Chief Digital Officer, right? So, and I'll tell you where the difference is. See, when we talk about digital transformation, it's not just about data.
Sure.
It spans. I mean, data is the fundamental, right? It's the platform on which digital experiences are built, right? And that spans across multiple other technologies or areas and customer experience and so on and so forth. See, when you say Chief Data Officer, I think that is still squarely under the CIO, so to say. It is one of the roles played under the CIO, because from a CIO perspective, which takes care of the entire information or technology landscape or ecosystem of a particular company, data is one of the enabling forces, so that will still remain there. The Chief Digital Officer, on the other hand, is a very different proposition, because Chief Digital Officer needs to be aligned more to business. And the reason for that is anything that is happening in technology has to be aligned to business. It has to give you business outcomes, right? So I think that differentiation is very important. I know CDO is being used for both these roles, so I thought that making that differentiation is important. So yes, Chief Data Officer is still, I think it's still a role in the IT organization, and Chief Digital Officer is something that is more aligned to business. As far as the CIO role, or Chief Digital Officer or Data Officer becoming the new CIO is concerned, see, not necessarily. Are they as important as the CIO? Or, if you go along those tracks, then like I said, your Chief Data Officer is a very important role. And, because data at the end of the day is the beginning of all kinds of journeys within any enterprise, whether it's digital, whether it's customer, whether it's anything else. Chief Digital Officer also has, has his own important role to play, his or her important role to play. So no, I don't think it's about replacing roles. It's about the top management of the company. When we say management, what I mean is senior leadership, whether it's board or the CEO, to recognize the importance of these roles. See, they should not be relegated to, okay, this is one role which is 4 levels, below the top level, and which is not getting the kind of attention or the kind of importance, right, especially from the business side of things. I think that is an area that we need to focus on in giving them the right kind of importance, giving them a seat at the table, right at the at the point where the strategy is being created. So yeah, so that's my take on this entire topic, Monica.
Sure. Well said, Saurabh. And I would say that, in fact, till date, as of now, like we speak, Chief CDO is Chief Data Officer. But you rightly pointed out that it's high time the D gets enhanced to digital, because the data is no more standalone apart from digitization, which includes AI, ML, blockchain, and all the aspects of digitization.
Absolutely.
So I think well said, Saurabh. And Swapna, what do you say about this?
Yeah, I was so immersed in Saurabh's answer that I kind of forgot the question. So just going back to the question, the CDO role, I think, has evolved over time, and we should probably consider what the CIO used to do, right? Yeah. Probably pre-cloud, where there was this massive hardware data center, apps being hosted in that data center, data being generated, and probably in the last 7 to 8 years, or slightly even before that, they would have on-prem data warehouses. So the IT organization not only had to maintain hardware, they had to maintain applications, keep them live and running. The data that was generated by the applications had to be brought into the warehouse, and reports had to be generated, which was shared amongst the organization. Everything about descriptive analytics, meaning what happened till now in the business, getting a pulse of the business of what has been, was what the IT team actually ran until now. Now, as cloud took over, Saurabh rightly said, CDO was the digitization role that sort of came up. I'm not saying that pre-cloud there was no digitization, but the speed at which the companies are moving now by adopting to the cloud, by having the ability to transform, by using more SaaS applications, you see how the IT role, the CIO role, has been transforming. A lot of the hardware responsibilities that the CIO had kind of have diminished. They've not gone away, but they have diminished, because most of these customers still remain in a hybrid environment. But now what happens to this data? Data now has to be used in a more predictive fashion. It should not only be descriptive, it should be able to be used for talking about the future. It should not be about only the past. It should also be about instantaneously understanding the business, instantaneously understanding about employees, instantaneously understanding about customers, instantly understanding the market changes and their impact on what the company's business, what would happen to the company's business, right? So the reason I went to this description was to show you that the CIO still remains a very important member of the organization. The role has transformed to being more digitized by adopting cloud and SaaS. The data has really increased in value. The way companies have been using this data to understand their business better, to transform their business better, and to redefine their business, it becomes imperative that a separate role be defined, which is the Chief Digital Officer. The Chief Digital Officer has to be married to the business. They have to be the interface, understanding how technology, how business needs can translate into technology. And hence, these two roles, to me, as I see, are evolving, but are different and are equally important.
Yeah, absolutely agree, Swapna. And I would add to it saying that this digital is pervading all parts of business, like you said. And all the enablement for intelligent business decision making is the ask of the CIO and the CDO and the Chief Data Officer. In between both of them is getting important by the day, because data is insights, and that's information what the business stakeholders look for. And you also talked about cloud. So which brings me to my next question. So how do you see the cloud adoption in organizations, specifically, let's say in BFSI or healthcare or other regulated industries? Do you see the customers are still hesitant and concerned about privacy and security, or the resisting countries or rather the customers are now open to adoption of clouds?
So one part is whether, around the verticals like BFSI, healthcare, which are regulated by laws of the land in different regions. And the other part of the question is around whether customers are concerned about cloud adoption, over concerns like security, compliance, and governance. I'll address the second part first. I think we are way past that, right? So cloud has proven, I think over the 4 or 5 years that it is, if not better, I think it's as secure as what you would have in a closed down on-premise system. So I think especially after COVID and after all the massive movements to cloud that have happened across the world and which continue, these things are moot now. So then the question arises, if security, compliance, and governance are something that cloud has taken care of and has proven over the last few years that it can take care of, then why are there still industries which are regulated? So there you come to the law of the land, that and there are different kind of laws. If you go to different countries and different regions, at some places what they say is that whatever the customer data, for example, has to, even if it is on cloud, has to remain within the country. Now that is one kind of a problem to have. In some other regions, the problem is where they say that if it is X kind of customer data, healthcare data, whatever, it cannot go to cloud. It has to remain on premise. I think it's a bit of a misinformed case, especially the second scenario where they are saying that it cannot move to cloud, right? So
yeah,
but it is impacting cloud adoption for sure in the regulated industries, I think. And very surprisingly, I still see some of these customers, right, especially from banking and very recently, they're still investing in on-premise systems. I mean, making huge investments in on-premise systems, which kind of completely beats logic, right? Because that's not the future. I mean, the future is cloud. I mean, why would you? I can understand keeping the lights on-premise and maybe just ensuring that things are running, but why would you invest in a big data ecosystem on-premise? That really doesn't make much sense when you know that maybe 3 years, 5 years down the line, these laws and regulations will change, will ease up, and things will move to cloud. So the enterprises, because of these laws, sometimes they have to spend more money. So it's also a burden on their cash and exchequer. Some of the enterprises have been doing, especially in regulated industries, is while the customer data may still sit on premise because of the regulations, they're still trying to find ways and means of how to cleanse that data of PII information, private information, and so on, and still use it for insights, right? Whether it's customer data, whether it's other kind of operations data. So for example, in healthcare industry, you have different kind of R&D data, right? On molecular research, on vaccine research, and so on. Now, while that may be proprietary to the company, but it's not really, I mean, I don't think the government is concerned about it sitting on premise or on the cloud. So those are the areas where a lot of AI and a lot of analytics is required to speed up this R&D process. I mean, in COVID, for example, we got the vaccine within 6 to 8 months, and that was fantastic. It would not have been possible without the power of AI, right? So, and in order to actually harness that power of AI, you need the processing power and the scale of cloud. So those also, even companies like BFSI and healthcare, they're trying to find what are the areas, around the regulation can we take to cloud, use that scale and processing power that is required. But yes, I think these regulations need to become a little more practical, because cloud as such, like I said, they haven't, all these concerns around security, compliance, and governance, all the fears that, the players and the companies had a few years back, I think those have been allayed. So I really don't think that should be a consideration. So yeah. Swapna?
Swapna, your thoughts on this?
Sure. This is, I guess, one of my most favorite topics, because we're seeing such transformation in the BFSI industry, even in healthcare for that matter, and super exciting. Talk about the motivators of why BFSI, healthcare, for that matter, even public sector, are actually adopting cloud and the ability to derive business insights using analytics platforms in the
Sure.
is putting it very plainly, it is the threat. It is the threat from health techs. It is the threat from fintechs. See, RBI, for example, take India, or for that matter, even the regulation industries in Europe and in Canada, North America. No one mandated don't do something. It's how you interpret law and you derive from it and then go and implement something. But now that there was a lethargy in this industry saying, I'm not sure. RBI, for example, in India, RBI really doesn't say you cannot go to the cloud, or you can go to the cloud for that matter. So maybe I should hold on. And that lethargy was there. But when you see these fintech companies, the fact that our own government in India has adopted UPI and digitized payment, that finance industry is transforming at humongous speed. And these banks, if they don't jump on that bandwagon, they're going to be left far behind. That was a huge push for these banks to suddenly become relevant, because they were slowly becoming, if they had waited 5-6 more years, they would have become irrelevant.
Yeah, sure.
Right? So that kind of really pushed them to say, no, I have to go to cloud. Now, let me fix this. The speed at which they're going, however, is not as fast as we would have liked, or they would have liked. I would say they would have liked, because the security, compliance, and the need to regulate to such an extent that they want no liabilities is kind of holding them back. Now, does cloud offer the tools? Do these data platforms offer the tools like end-to-end encryption, like anonymization, like the capability to just take metadata and interpret it to such an extent that you can uniquely create a UID, right, for a customer in a bank or an insurance customer? The cloud provides all these tools. The cloud provides the ability to generate your own key for encryption, right? Just at a very high level, talking about some very simple security technologies. But at the end of the day, it's people, process, and tools. I could give all the tools to a bank, and the bank people might not know how to use them, might not use them in the right way, might not implement the right process. So there are still fears. So there is education required. The cloud gives the tools, they have to be able to use it and actually implement it. And that is what we are going through right now. Just to give some references, public references for us, TD Bank in Canada, Ratnakar Bank in India are public references for us, who have in the last 2 years seen massive savings, massive understanding of their customers by actually running their data in the cloud, analyzing that data and understanding it on what to do next. Right? So now if you take healthcare, I again want to talk about a big hospital chain in India who has worked with us, Apollo, to generate a cardiovascular risk score. Now, as Saurabh was rightly saying, AI is probably one of the best uses of AI is in healthcare. How do we help the human race have a better quality of life? The cardiovascular risk score, based on petabytes of data, is able to, on certain parameters, predict whether a person is at a risk for a cardiovascular disease. Now, this could not have happened without the economies of scale that we get with cloud. So both in the healthcare and the BFSI industry, there has been a huge impetus by fintech, by health tech, to push them to the cloud. They are understanding what the cloud can provide in terms of security. We recently also GA'd a feature called confidential computing. You actually are able to run your processing, your compute in a completely confidential manner, in a manner where no one else can see what is happening in that compute. So I think the tools are there. How they use them, how fast they use them, how fast they absorb them. And we're seeing the transformation happen.
Sure. So you mentioned about people, process, and technology, that cloud is bringing so many functionalities out of the box, which are very much important. And healthcare, we know, as you mentioned, is where AI and ML and cloud and all this massive data computation and with blink of an eye is saving people's life and even adding value to the ones which are there in need of healthcare. So together with all of this, what I think is now the chief digital officer and the customers have to look into their data literacy. So there has to be a culture shift between within the organization where it is not data is no more the asset of the application owners. It is the asset of the organization. The C level is very much excited about data, and that is where the data literacy, the data ethics, the culture change, the collaboration, all those aspects have to come into the front seat, and the chief data officer has to drive it all. And we also talked about there's a shift in the mindset of the architectures also is what we have to think of. Means we talked about centralization in a cloud, and to add to what Saurabh was also saying, it is not just cloud right now. So for organizations who are still in that restricting state because of not being well aware or not being maybe restricted with some compliances and policies as of now, not getting the right lead right at that given point of time, even there is a hybrid model, I would say. It's no more like only on-prem or I am completely jumping onto a particular cloud. Rather, it's a multi-cloud, on-prem, everything together, a hybrid environment. And I think COVID has taught us this, that the new normal is a fluid concept. Means you have to be open to adopt things, you have to be open to learn things and scale up as quickly as your peers are. Which brings me to another question, Swapna, for you.
Mhm.
So, do you also see a mindset shift from the centralized data architecture with all these multi and hybrid environments coming in to a decentralized one where people are, or the stakeholders rather, are trying to decentralize the ownership as well? And there comes data. Now, where comes data? Data quality is there, and the scalability, and all the other aspects are there. So, which brings me to the semantic layer. What are your thoughts on data mesh and data fabric?
Sure. So I think these are very good concepts, right? The data mesh, the data fabric. But I'll go back to your first question. Are you seeing a transformation from central to distributed? I'll be honest with you, Monica, it really depends on the size of the organization.
Yeah.
Data mesh is really for large multi-business type organizations where you need data democracy to actually work. You have the capability in the teams to understand the data they're getting. They have the resources, human resources, and otherwise to be able to manage the data, engineer the data, and then use that data to rightly grow their business. So it's very dependent on the culture and the nature of the business, whether to use data mesh or a distributed form of architecture or not. And we have a great case, which again is a public case study with ABN AMRO, a Netherlands-based bank, who have used data mesh very successfully. But they also, like most organizations, had to go through a cultural transformation. There is also an organizational transformation that has to happen. There has to be a data stewardship team created. Data, the golden source has to be defined. They have to ensure that data its authenticity is being maintained, its lineage can be understood as it traverses the cycle from the point it's being generated to the point it's being actually utilized, whether it's for reporting, downstream application, or for being, creating a data model otherwise. But there is a whole organizational change that has to happen, as you can see. So data mesh, honestly, is for large organizations. When you look at a data fabric, the concept of a data fabric is more applicable to general organizations, because what data fabric, and there are definitions from various organizations, but I'll stick with the definition that I have grown up with and our organization adopts. It's really about ensuring that the right people in the organization have the access to the right data. And access, quote unquote, I'm using it very lightly, because it could be as simple as getting data in a cube so that they can generate reports.
Yeah.
Versus working on the data, doing engineering on the data, building a model out of the data. Then you get into that more mesh kind of architecture. And even if you look at mesh, Monica, I know I'm jumping between the two topics, but it's important to understand why one versus the other. Even if you look at the mesh topic, the mesh, by when it was defined or as it evolved, it was meant to be a form of defining a structure which can be replicated in the hub as well as in all the spokes, right? Now the spoke it could be a multi-spoke and so on, depending on the size of the organization. However, it wasn't meant to define the fact that the data has to be replicated in the center as well as in every spoke. So how the organization defines the usage of data mesh really defines how complicated the data mesh can get. Is it just a structure and a framework which has to be replicated between the hub and spokes? Or is it also an organizational change where data from the source is given as is to the spoke, and then the spoke manages everything? It's not realistic, because I'll give you an example. The customer transaction data has to be used by both the credit card team as well as the team which is reporting on accounts in a bank. And these could be two spokes of the mesh, but you're sending the same data. Now, both would massage the data. At some point, you would need to understand what happened to that transaction as that data of the transaction goes through its journey. So it is, I know, a long answer to your question, but it's very, very dependent on the size of the organization. But at the end of the day, every business wants data. Whether they have the capability to use it or whether they're just going to use it and actually further it and engineer it, or whether they use it just for reading a report, is what makes the difference between what technology to use.
Yeah, so I would add to what you just said is where we SIs fit in with all the data and the vertical expertise and the digitization expertise, where for a data mesh kind of a scenario, we don't just hand over access to any business stakeholder that it is your responsibility, go ahead and do whatever you want to do with it. Because of course that poor guy will be in a mesh to handle that mesh.
No pun intended.
Yeah. So it's that's where we people come in with all the experience, and we make it very easy and simple for them, and all the use case collection and all the vertical experience and all the data experience come into that mesh where it has to be made very simple and easy, and yet he knows that he or she knows that this is something which can be trusted, which is transparent. I know where it is coming from. I know it makes sense for my requirement of whatever analytics or reports the management level or the higher ups are looking at. So, Saurabh, with all this digitization and transformation that discussions that we have been having, do you see from your visibility as a global DNA head that what is the future? Means, are people moving away from MDM and data quality and governance, or do you see that all of this, while mesh and fabric and other aspects keep coming, monetization and marketplace and stuff, do you see data governance, MDM and quality still as the core, or do you see all of this getting absorbed with any of these offerings which are there?
Okay, so I would like to, again, since you said it will get absorbed by mesh, I don't think that's going to happen for sure. So let's look at, before I come to data governance, MDM, data quality, I would like to also I have some comments on the previous question, so I would like to go there first. We talked about data mesh, data fabric, or currently how the way data is, which is a centralized, data warehouse, which was a trend over the last decade or more than that, 10, 15 years now. Why are we even talking about data mesh and data fabric, right? The only reason is because the data has become so humongous, the amount of data, the volume of data, the speed of data, right? And the types of data, they are so varied, so large that it has all become almost impossible to manage it centrally, which is why people are thinking on how do we do this, right? So because everybody has tons of data, they know what to do, they know what they want, but they don't know how do I manage this data to actually get those insights. Which is why, what is mesh? Mesh is basically trying to break that centralized, zone into decentralized zones so that the data becomes more manageable, more palatable, right? Hopefully, the data product owner, could be a business group, for example. Maybe, at their level, they understand the data the best, they understand business the best. So maybe they are able to shape that data, or put that data in a shape and form which can be utilized by other parts of the organization. Data fabric is again something, we are again talking about consumption. So if you look at whether it's data mesh or data fabric, it's all about, data management and consumption. How do you manage this data? Like I said, different types of data, different sources of data, the volume of data, how do you manage it? And then how do you consume it? It's all about consumption. Now, when you talk about MDM, data governance, data quality, look, those are the basic tenets of making that data palatable, right? Whether that data was residing centrally in a large data warehouse that we have traditionally seen, or whether it is distributed amongst the business groups, where you have data domains and data products and so on, or you bring them all together in a data fabric, you build a semantic layer to create the data fabric for consumption. If the data quality itself is not good, if the data is not governed, if different groups are using different definitions of that data, the data is not consumable. It's not palatable. MDM, again, very important. Now, whether you have a central MDM, which, the different domain owners they refer to, or whether you have MDM split by business domains, now that's a different discussion. We are already seeing trends around multi-domain MDM and so on. So maybe that multi-domain MDM actually gets split down to different domains. That is a conversation we can have, but data governance, for example, still has to be central. Data quality has to be pervasive. Data, wherever it is coming from, quality has to be at the top-notch level. Otherwise, the whole consumption, becomes useless. I mean, how you provision that data, how you consume that data. So, no, there is no, there is absolutely nothing saying that it will be absorbed by mesh. That's not possible. Mesh is just an architectural construct. The reason it even came into fore is because of unmanageability of the data that we have today, right? So to kind of distribute it to people and to owners who understand it better. And like Swapna rightly mentioned, it's all about the size and complexity of the enterprise. If the size is small, manageable, you continue with a data warehouse or, data lake and lake house and so on and so forth. Just bring all your data to one place, and if it can be managed there, well and good. Or you just, or if you have multiple systems sitting in different part of your organizations, build a semantic layer, check your data quality, govern it properly, and then you make it consumable. But if your organization is, has multiple businesses, multiple functions, very complex, different kinds of data, so, product data, patient data, customer data, and so on and so forth, then mesh is probably the way to go, where let the businesses who understand the data very well, let them handle the data, let them ensure it is, the data quality, and provide that data as a service to you, to the rest of the organization, right? And there are multiple ways in terms of provisioning patterns. You have data as a service, APIfication, data marketplace, internal marketplace, external marketplace, all kinds of things that we see today. So that's what it is. So no, data governance, MDM, data quality are the fundamentals of ensuring that data is usable. Otherwise, no BI, no analytics, no AI can happen over it.
Yeah, absolutely. It means data quality even is getting more and more critical, and data governance is most important in the boardroom discussion agenda, is what I would say, because the DNA leaders from the customer side, they see that without data governance, they don't even know if the data is good enough to be trusted, apart from all these compliance and policies that they have to adhere to. So, which brings me to the next question, Saurabh, for you, and Swapna, I would want your thoughts on this as well. So, what is the traction that you see with Tech Mahindra and Microsoft Azure and Microsoft in general when it comes to cloud and all these data solutions and digital solutions?
A lot of organizations, because these are buzzwords today, data mesh and data fabric, and if they're looking at data modernization initiatives, there is a discussion, okay? what we try and do, and Monica, you had the data consulting practice, so you yourself have been a part of a lot of these conversations. The organizations really are not sure, not all the time, whether they should even change their current architecture, or the framework of the way the data is set up, whether they should go with a data mesh architecture, whether they should just build a data fabric and get done with it. So so what we have been doing is we have been advising our customers, we have been working with them to understand the complexity, the scale, the matrix, or whatever of their organization, and we are then trying to figure out a way or figure out recommendation steps in terms of what should they do, how should they govern that data, how should they if they need to change the data architecture at all. So there are various facts and means, but yes, data mesh and data fabric are at the center of conversation with a lot of customers. Cloud is at the center of conversation with almost all our customers. All the new engagements or conversations that we are getting in, a lot of traction on that front. And as far as Microsoft Azure is concerned, I think we have seen a very massive uptake on Azure, especially in the last 2 to 3 years, and it is definitely one of the leading. It is, I think, I would say, it's the leading hyperscaler in the market at this point in time, even from an enterprise demand perspective.
Yeah, so you should notice Swapna's smile when you say that. Swapna, over to you now.
Absolutely. Thanks, Saurabh and Monica. The affirmation from one of our strongest partners about what Azure can offer our customers is, yes, very heartwarming, and hence the big smile. I think what Azure has been able to provide, and because I'm primarily working only in the data platform, not necessarily in the Azure infra, is what customers tell me is that end-to-end. And what is end-to-end? End-to-end is very subjective to what we're talking about. So end-to-end is hosting my application securely, being able to provide the performance as I generate data in my OLTP transaction database, hosting that on Azure, to being able to ingest that data, providing CDC in the best format, analyzing that data, whether it is Spark or whether it is SQL, and then being able to even visualize it on the same platform with Power BI, then being able to govern it. So security, visualization, and platform all in one is probably, I agree with Saurabh, is probably the best that we can provide with Microsoft Azure. In addition to that, I would say strong partners like you. We are, after all, a technology and a platform company. And without partners, honestly, we can't give customers what they need. So partners like you that are able to take these tools in the toolkit and build that building that the customer wants is, I think, what makes us successful. Data is absolutely, I think, every conversation, and just to share with you, we added 40 plus new data platforms just in the last 18 months, that too just in India. So worldwide, there's massive uptake. And the need of the hour is, help me understand my data better, help me get it to all the right people. So my sales team is enabled. So my HR feels stronger, that they understand the employees better and is able to decide the next program. My finance team understands their data and able to predict further so that they can add the right programs, feed that data back to the sales teams, and hence grow my business. And we've seen businesses grow over the last 7-8 years. We've seen some customers just shoot up their trajectories from being not so good financially to now becoming these huge organizations. And I guess that's the pleasure of the partnership of Microsoft and TechM. So we value that. And I think that's definitely the most important thing on customers' minds today.
Thank you so much, Swapna. Thank you. And thank you, Saurabh. So I think which brings me to the end of this call today. And I would say that what we understand from today's discussion is that the Chief Digital Officer is what organizations should be focusing on. The Chief Data Officer remains as important as he or she was as a role. And the CIO is there to stay. The cloud is going to be there to stay. the multi-cloud and hybrid environments are going to stay. And we as organizations, as service providers and as product vendors are there to cater to customers for all the challenges that they face. But it is also about people, process, and technology, where you need to choose the right partner to be along your path and helping you in what you are doing. And which again brings us to your smile, Swapna. And thank you for those nice words for Tech Mahindra. And I think we should do these dialogues, data dialogues more often. It really kinds of open up your thoughts, and even others get to know your thoughts as a product vendor and our thoughts as an SI and what we are doing. So you talked about a couple of case studies as well, which are very heartening. And we as Techem, while we work with all our prestigious product vendors, we also have our own platforms, and we have got these joint go-to-market solutions as well. So unified data management framework, because we have been talking data so much, and me being a data person, I have to mention the IP, which I am a custodian of. So UDMF, as we call it, is something which caters data quality and data migration. And then we have got other platforms as well. So Sprinter is a cloud enabler, cloud migration enabler. And then we have got lots of other AI platforms and the other platforms as well, as we do all the time. And maybe we should catch up more frequently for such dialogues. And thank you so much for your time today. Thank you, Saurabh, so much. And it was really nice conversation to have. And that's all for now. Thank you, and have a nice day ahead.